Thinking of getting into wake foiling and want to know exactly where it can go and what you can do on it? Well, in this video, we give an interview with Peter from Liquid Force where we talk about where wake foiling is going and how you can have an absolute blast with the sport for years to come. What's up, everybody? This is Mitch from BoardCo, and I am here with Peter, who is the design engineer from Liquid Force. And today we are going to be talking a lot about foils, and particularly about wake foiling and what it is, where it comes from, some of the background, and why it might be a sport that you want to get into with you and your family and might be a really cool addition to your boat. So, Peter, first off, give us a little bit of background on yourself and who you are and where you come from, and
yeah, so
your background with our industry.
So I've been a design engineer at Liquid Force for about 6 years, and I came on kind of at the birth of this new kind of foil craze that's kind of been building slowly over the last 3 or 4 years. And I just from my background as an aerospace engineer, coming into this industry and having love from water sports, growing up water skiing and wakeboarding, and then seeing this kind of new concept of people on foils, and then also, taking a step back from a couple of years, having some experience with the air chair and having, some bad experiences with the air chair and stuff like that. But seeing this cool idea of people just flying above the water and not sitting above the water, but standing on a board, it just really kind of grabbed my attention. And from like the early days that I was at Liquid Force, we started, messing around with some stuff, taking these foil shapes, bolting them onto wakeboards. And every day it was like you were just developing this new sport. And it was so fun because every day you just, you saw what was maybe possible in the future. You didn't know how you were going to get there, but you'd get this glimpse of like, I don't know, maybe you could just like let go of the rope and like surf this wake with nothing and like just everything. And then it was, fast forward, I was like, maybe we can go to the second wake. Well, maybe we can go back to the third wake. And then, so every day it was just like this big learning experience that was just like totally just grabbed me and like sucked me in. And, nowadays, like it's hard pressed to get me to like do anything else other than foil, so.
That's awesome. So, and yeah, to your point, Pierre, I have had a bit of experience with air chairs and other foils back in the past, which if you've had experience with an air chair, you probably had a bad experience with an air chair. You may have had good ones too, but guaranteed you've had some bad ones as well. But for those of you who may not know, the idea of a foil is that whether it's on an air chair or whether it's on a wake foil with a board, is basically that you're moving through the water or across on top of the water, but instead of having the board or an air chair or whatever other device you're on, instead of it just skimming across the top of the water, the float or the buoyancy that generates and the lift that it generates, it actually comes from a wing and a foil system that sits below the surface of the water and creates lift and glide. And essentially, you may not even have to interact with the surface of the water at all. You do right when you get up, but once you're up, you're actually kind of floating up above the water, which creates it's really cool, and it's a totally wild feeling. If you've been on an air chair or anything like that, you'll understand, or you may get what I'm saying there. If you haven't, it's just a totally wild and unique experience of like just floating on the water. So, well, Peter, going through and talking about that, why would somebody look at, so people may have seen different wake foils or different foil boards and thinking, hey, this is kind of wild and crazy and different. Why would somebody want to add that to the quiver of things that they can do on their boat?
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. So, there's, especially as a lot of these other sports have progressed, water skiing, wake surfing, wakeboarding, there's a certain level of conditions that are kind of almost required for everybody to have fun now. You need the water to be relatively glassy, you don't want a whole lot of wind chop. When the lake gets blown out, it's more of a struggle to stay in the wave surfing, makes your wakeboard session not quite as fun. But there's literally no bad weather, there's no bad foil days. The worse the weather is, probably the better the foiling will be. So like it just gets you out in a variety of new conditions that you might not have necessarily got on the water for. And it just opens your mind because, we're so used to coming at the wakes, jumping over them and stuff like this, and now you're using this energy from this airplane wing that you're on to kind of take you into new directions. And it's basically like, I like to say, like the playground has just got a lot bigger. So if you can just think about that.
Absolutely. Now, for me personally, when I first saw wake foiling, I had my experience of seeing air chairing and that in the past, and there's guys doing all kinds of crazy stuff on air chairs and doing, you know, backflips and other different tricks on an air chair and going big. You're not going to necessarily do that on a wake foil unless you're NOAA legal. And so my initial thought when I saw wake foiling was like, oh, this is kind of it's kind of cool, but it's a fad and it's something that people may do a little bit. But that doesn't seem to be the case. People start getting into it and then they get really into it and it's really fun. Probably explain a little bit of the progression of what happens with foiling, and as somebody gets into it and gets better, what they can expect.
Yeah. So the closest comparison is probably wake surfing, right? You know, for wake surfing, you're either on the left or right side of the boat, you have your nice wave, and then, you know, when you start foiling, you're kind of in that same zone. And then what you'll find is that that little wave that you almost been locked into on your surfboard, now you can go out a little bit further, you can go a little bit deeper in the wave, a little bit further out. So it just opens up that whole kind of area to kind of shred some more. And then, you know, from there, it really starts expanding, because then you can go to the back wake and then you can go shoot across the wake. You can shoot out and pump around. You don't even need a boat sometimes. You can go circles around the boat. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of driven from, you know, people who really like wake surfing. And then once you get that feeling of floating and surfing, yeah, you can go anywhere.
Absolutely. So when looking at wake foiling, what you guys are doing there, are you taking any kind of inspiration from what's going on the ocean side of things with guys riding foils out in the ocean and translating that to what we're experiencing behind the boat?
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of similarities that you can draw. Basically, you know, the one major difference though is your ocean wave is created from either like a wind swell or a ground swell, so you have a lot of energy that's underneath the wave itself. But when we're behind the boat, we just have the energy that's created from the boat. So that's actually not a very deep pocket of water that has a lot of energy underneath it. So that's the main difference you'll see is like on the wake foils, you'll have a slightly shorter mast, kind of in the 27 to 28 inch range, versus the ocean foils will be a little bit deeper or a little bit taller, just because, you know, there's so much more energy in those waves that reach all the way down to the bottom, versus, you know, if you were on a, say like a 36 inch mast behind a boat, you'd have to be pretty high up for, you know, you to be in on that energy of the wave. So that's kind of the main difference. A lot of similarities though with the way the wing designs are going. You know, they're getting a lot more efficient in terms of being able to glide, you know, out past where the energy of the wave is. And you'll see guys pumping around the boat, very similar to them pumping out in the ocean. So a lot of that, you know, we've driven a lot of inspiration from those types of designs.
That's cool.
Brought it into the wake world.
It's really interesting to see how all this stuff kind of comes full circle, and how we were looking at air chairs back in the day, and then obviously they kind of fizzled out and went away a little bit. It's only a handful of people messing with it and still doing the foil stuff. And then it gets adopted and picked up more on the ocean side of things, and then we're back to doing it behind the boat, but just in a totally different application. Yeah. That's more influenced from a wake surf end of things than what we were doing from, you know, water skiing or wakeboarding like back in the day.
Yeah, and I will say that, just, you know, to touch on the air chair, you know, the wake foiling is a million times easier. It's your balance is a lot more normal. You're standing on a board versus sitting on it, and everything about it. If you ever had a bad experience on the air chair, like, I can guarantee you'll have a better experience trying to wake foil. So. And
that's the interesting thing in that feeling of like floating on top of the water in an air chair. It's kind of cool on an air chair. For some reason, it just translates totally differently when you're standing on the board, and it's a wild experience when you're doing it, and it's so much fun. It's just an absolute blast. Yeah. So it's kind of that for people who get really into surfing or you know, even other water sports, whether we're talking wakeboarding and the rush you get from jumping the wake, or from slalom skiing, the rush you get from making a big turn and cutting back in through the wake. I feel like I get that same type of, I don't know if it's adrenaline or dopamine or whatever it is that ends up hitting my brain when I'm floating up on a foil and up above the water. It's just kind of an addicting feeling. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So Peter, in going through and looking at this, if people are looking at maybe adding a foil or a quiver, are there any other specific parameters, like a specific boat they have to be riding behind, or that makes a big difference while you're foiling?
Yeah, I mean, so pretty much all of your new wake surf, wakeboard boats, any of the foils you'll be able to ride the first wake on, no problem with no rope, you can surf it. But then the beauty of the foils is that, if you have a direct drive boat or an old ski boat or some of these older options that people still have, you can foil behind that, and it's a ton of fun, and it doesn't need as much of a wake to get it to work. So that's kind of the beauty of the foil, is it's opening up the sport to a lot of new people that maybe don't have, a new boat or stuff like that.
Absolutely. In fact, in some of the video that you guys may see in this video or the other videos we're talking about with foiling, with some of our staff members and that riding on foil, a lot of that footage is actually shot behind a direct drive ski boat with zero ballast whatsoever. It's about as small of a wake as you can create out at our BoardCo test lab. And so you can really ride behind almost any boat that's out there, whether it's an older ski boat, even different things like fishing boats and that. And correct me if I'm wrong, you don't necessarily have to surf the foil. You can actually still ride further back on the boat and use a rope in that as well.
Yeah, that's a very fun thing to do too, just to get the feeling of it. I mean, you're literally floating in the air, so it's a new feeling, and you don't need to let go of the rope for it to be fun. So
absolutely. Yeah. So cool. Well, hopefully that's helpful for you guys, giving you a little bit of background on foiling and that. Check out the other videos that we've done here in regards to foil boarding and a lot of different tips and tricks, as well as the details where we break down the stuff, different components of the boards, so that you can get a better understanding of not just foiling, but also what foil might be right for you and how you can get the best use out of it. So thanks a ton once again. This is Mitch from BoardCo, here with Peter from Liquid Force. We appreciate your time spending with us, and we'll see you later.